My name is Brett. I'm a business ambassador here with the Huntsman School of Business, and I'm really excited actually to introduce Jason Kintzler. He's the founder and CEO of PitchEngine, which he'll explain to you quite a bit more about his story, how he got there, and what PitchEngine is exactly. Just in the little time that I've had to get to know Jason, he is really, really good at breaking down how he got to where he is right now and what it takes for any of you who are thinking of starting your own business or really just any direction you want to take your career. He's really good at giving you advice and insight as to what it takes to be successful. So really, really take advantage of this opportunity. He's got a lot of unique experience. Just in a group of us were able to talk to him a little bit, and every single person who is thinking of starting a business or has some experience, Jason could just had like another life experience that he's had that he could associate with that person. So take advantage of the questions that you're going to be able to ask him as well, because he'll give you some really good insight. Before we finish, when he's done, he'll open it up for some question and answers. But before anybody leaves, we do want to say one last final thing. So try not to just leave immediately. I'll stand back up and we'll have one quick announcement. But with that, I'll turn the time over to Jason.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. Thanks to Michael for bicycling into the office one day. It's really cool. So far, I've been really impressed. The group of students I met with earlier had great business ideas, tons of passion for what they're doing. Everybody's great communicators so far. We just had a dinner a little while ago, and it's just been awesome. So this is really fun. It's such a great time just in the world, in the time that we're in for this. It's such a great time to be independent and to do your own thing and to take advantages of the skills that you have and this education that you're getting. It's funny, Brett talked about all these life experiences. I didn't realize I was as old as I am, I guess. But you tend to get a lot of these experiences, and exposure to all these things is really important and really relevant. And I don't think I could have started my business without exposure to things, without a career in this or some experience in that. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but I think that's important to know. And so when you see some of these people, you meet people, you have people in your family that have businesses, soak it in, I mean, you're soaking in the education part, you're learning the fundamentals, but talking to people is huge, it's powerful. And I think when Michael gives his lecture about bicycling across the country, talking to these entrepreneurs, I mean, what a cool thing to be able to talk to all these people that are probably doing what they love and struggling and winning and whatever. It's really cool, and it's a cool time to be able to do that. Technology is part of the reason that we're able to do these things now, and I was fortunate enough to sort of identify that. I by no means was a tech guru. I could run a VCR and my phone and stuff like that. VCRs were like things before DVDs. You watch movies and stuff. So I could run that, but I wasn't a programmer or developer, and so I didn't have that mindset. I was a communications guy. In high school, I played sports, and I liked seeing my name and my picture in the newspaper. Thought that was pretty cool. So when I was in high school, I started playing around with the yearbook and the newspaper and wanted to make other people experience that, right? So I'd write about them, take cool pictures of them, and I liked that. And so as I got into college, I didn't really know. I dabbled. In high school, I took a criminal justice class. Why, I'm not sure. Realized real quick I didn't want to do that. But when I got into college, I went to Montana State in Billings, actually. And I'm from Wyoming, born in Lander. And so small town was kind of already in my blood. And the one thing that I sort of took out of that, and I think many of you are probably from, I would venture to say, the Mountain West region, whether it be Utah or some surrounding state. There's something that we all sort of share and have in common, and I think it's an independence. I think we're born into families that are, somewhat independent. We understand work. We understand work ethic. And that's a big deal, and that's hard for me to convey to some of my peers, maybe in Silicon Valley or even New York City, it's a different kind of thing. You know, we're going to be working hard, I think, whether it's at a career or whether it's, you know, in dirt. And I think that's an important thing to understand. And so I preface sort of PitchEngine and my career and sort of how I got to start a business and be fortunate enough to do that just by, you know, I think all of us sort of have these traits, and I think it's debatable, and it's probably fun discussion whether you're born into entrepreneurship, whether you can become an entrepreneur, whether you can be taught to be an entrepreneur, or what Michael's learning. You know, are there certain traits that entrepreneurs share? It's fascinating stuff. It's really interesting. So it's not to say that I'm not cut out for that or whatever. I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur. I didn't go to college thinking I want to start a business. It just wasn't even in my mindset back then. So I was very enterprising. I wanted to do things. I wanted to start things. I knew I could do it. I always felt confident that I could do things or do something better than somebody else. And now a day doesn't go by I don't look at a business model, a brand, something, and want to do it better and improve it and feel like I can do that. And you know, maybe that's arrogance, maybe I'm brash, maybe something, but I think that comes from experience and exposure. You see so many things, and you see this industry do this, and could it be applied to this industry? And so what a great time to do that because of technology. But back to the roots, you know, my upbringing was, you know, pretty standard. You know, my dad was a cowboy. I did a lot of ranch type stuff, and I always use the analogy, you know, when you think of tech startups, you think of Silicon Valley and San Francisco. That's just what we've been sort of taught, right? That's Fast Company and Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur and all those things, TechCrunch. But the reality of sort of starting a business isn't as glamorous as what I read in those magazines. It was real easy. You had an idea, and you'd go and tell some people, and they'd throw money at it, and you'd see if it worked. But that just didn't really make sense to me. It never really seemed like tangible. To just somebody give me money and me try something, right? I was telling the table earlier at dinner, you hear a lot of people say, I don't know that it's entrepreneurs. I think it's like people that raise money in Silicon Valley. They say, well, you know, you're going to fail a lot. You're going to try to start things, you're going to fail. Be prepared to fail. I don't buy into that at all. Like, I don't like to fail. I don't like to lose at foosball, you know? So the idea of failing, like, it's not even in my... You know, we learn to dust ourselves off and get up at like 3 years old. So when you go to make a business, you want to make sure fundamentally all the pieces are in place. You know, you're not just trying it. It's a pretty big risk. You know, and I guess if there's a trait all entrepreneurs share, it's taking risks. You know, they're able to take risks somehow. And maybe we all deal with that differently. Some people deal with it because for financial reasons, they're able to take a financial risk. But there's all sorts of risks that go with it, right? There's health risks, you know? You dive into this thing and you're doing it, you know, 16 hours a day. That's going to take a toll on life and social life and whatever, right? But at the same time, you're passionate about it. So if you're really into it, it's fun. It doesn't feel like work. And if you really believe in it, then you'll drive to sort of make that happen. For me, it was just like any sort of work that my family did. You know, if I dug a hole and set a fence post and I set it in the ground and it was straight, and I made another fence post, you know, I measured it and I set it straight, and I was doing this work for somebody, and they thought it was good and they wanted to pay me for it, I knew that if they paid me for that, if I could build more fence or build that fence faster, I could get paid more, right? It's like pretty logical. I dig a hole, I get paid. If I dig a bigger hole, maybe I can make more money. If I can hire someone to dig some more holes, it's pretty logical stuff, right? That's how I went into entrepreneurship. That's how I went into starting a business. I knew that the thing had to make money. You know, like, I can't do it if it doesn't. What's the point of doing building a business if there's no, that's part of the business, right? It's a circle, it's got to make some revenue, you know? And so I went into it with that in mind. Now you hear a lot about businesses that just start up and they'll figure out how to make money later. Maybe that can happen. I know it works in the world. Things have done it. You know, there's the Instagrams of the world and the Snapchats of the world, but there's not very many of those. And that's definitely a different economy. I think for most of us, we want to build something that is sort of sustainable as a business, meaning it can run, it can live. And so I went into this PitchEngine thing that way. So I go into college. I'd go to work at the school newspaper because that's all I knew, I guess. I was always good at writing, so that came natural. And just got into that, and I guess it was halfway through my freshman year, the editor left or something happened, and I became the editor of the paper. So I took on this responsibility to make that, that was my thing, and I was really passionate about it. And to the level where, I had to get I know that the paper would be printed in another town. I was in Billings, Montana, and the paper was printed like 2 hours away in another town. So I had to get it on the Greyhound bus for it to be shipped to this place where they would print it. And the Greyhound bus left at 4 in the morning. So naturally, I would finish the paper at about 3:45 in the morning and get it to the bus stop and get it sent to the thing. And this cycle went on. And I eventually, started to build a little team, and we hired some people. And the paper at that time was governed under the school student senate, and it was funded by the school. And we thought, well, that's not a good thing for a newspaper. We need to be, independent and all these things. So we spun it off and we made it independent, and we came up with an ad model and all these things. And so in my own little way, before there was entrepreneurship programs, it served as a little bit of an incubator for me to do this and to sort of learn and sort of cut my teeth in building something and also sort of taking risks, I guess. But the biggest thing was I had that work ethic. I think in retrospect, thinking back, I was willing to stay up and, I would work until 3 in the morning on this newspaper so that once every 2 weeks this thing would come out. And, it was one of those things. I was passionate about it. I liked doing it. It was fun. But there was no real reward. I wasn't getting paid more because the thing even happened, right? So it was this work ethic, but you had to take pride in it. So these are like fundamental things, but they all contribute. And for me, I started doing that. I left when I was a junior. I was hired by the local TV station, which was a CBS affiliate, to start doing some reporting and writing for TV. And I think I talked too much. So the second weekend that I was working, I got on air and I started doing reporting, and I became a reporter. I was doing live shots and stand-ups around town and doing all that stuff. And I was only, I don't know if I was 20 then. I was probably 19, 20. Great experience, tons of fun. Got to meet lots of people. Loved it. Went and became a main news anchor in Butte. Did Butte, Bozeman, Helena, Montana news for a while. Went back to Billings. Long story short, I spent about 7 years in TV and had a blast. Loved it. I love the creative aspect. I'm kind of a creative guy. I like to create the packages, the video packages, and write stories and do all those things. And that was really fun. But in that process, it was kind of like a first career. But media, I don't know if you've read any media lately, probably not, but it's not really making money these days. And it really wasn't. It was starting to decline then, right? So even TV, it's a pretty, especially in small market TV, it's not a super lucrative career path unless you're going to be at a big market TV station. Salt Lake's probably a good example. Denver, Seattle, something like that. But Billings, Montana wasn't that big size, so I had to figure out what I was going to do. Was I going to go to the East Coast and spend a couple years and work at a TV station there and hope to get back to like a Denver or something like that? I wasn't really crazy about living in a place like Denver. I wanted to live in a place like Lander, that was what I like to do. I like recreation. I like to fly fish. I like to mountain bike, whatever, ski, snowboard. So it started to sort of sink in that all my friends, people that were in this small town, graduating, they're all spending their time trying to get out. How can I get out? How can I get to the big city so I can compete with all these other people in the big city for the same job? And it kind of hit me that all my life, growing up in Montana and Wyoming, and I'm sure you see it in Utah as well, is people acquire their wealth in other places and retire here. That's because that's where they want to live. It's where they want to ultimately end up. And so I thought, instead of trying to spend all my time getting out, what if I spent my time trying to stay? And so at that point, I was 21, 22 years old. Through a number of decisions, I ended up going to work doing marketing for an outdoor company in Wyoming. So it brought me back to Wyoming from Montana, and I got to really understand PR and marketing and became a brand manager at a company that was growing and was getting really popular, and leveraging PR, public relations, we could really tell the story, and we could really, I could start to paint the picture. So here I was, former journalist who loved telling stories and interviewing people, And back into high school, I loved telling those stories of people and putting them in the paper because I loved the way it made them feel, right? So I did that same type of thing for a company. And at first, you know, you're like, oh, well, it's, you know, being a journalist is so noble, you know? This is a noble thing. I'm helping people. But at a company, I can't help people. But once you start to get in and realize that the economy of that is much different, and it's so much fun to be able to grow a business and to build a product and all those things. And that's what we're able to do. And as a business grows, the business hires more people move to town, they build houses, the economy, I mean, it's like, it's a cyclical thing. So as much as we hear about businesses that do a social good and all those things, it's important, I think, the more I get into this, to understand that simply starting a business and simply having employees is helping the world. It's helping the economy. It's helping, you know, our lives. So because I don't donate my boot soles, you know, through my business, doesn't mean I'm not helping the community. And so it's an interesting thing, because right now we're on this wave of companies have to have another reason for existing. But back to how this got started. I was at this marketing company doing this, realizing that, understanding that business is fun and talking about business is fun. And I really started to identify that businesses had some resources. So in order for us to get people to talk about our products, we had to spend some money. We had to take really nice pictures. You know, realtors have to take really nice pictures of real estate listings so that people will buy their properties, right? Same thing with products. The products you buy, the coats the fabrics you touch in the store, all that stuff has to be right so that it makes a good first impression. So brands are willing to invest in that. On the media side, whether it be newspaper or TV or radio or whatever the digital platform it is, revenue is hard to come by. They don't have a lot of resources. So I realized this, you know, because I used to be a journalist. I'm like, okay, we have these resources. We want to get all this content to people, but we're not really doing it. Because at the time, this was 2006, 2007, people weren't sharing stuff like they do now, obviously. I was on a thing called MySpace, which was the predecessor to Facebook. And it was like Facebook, except it was a little more self-serving. You had like a page that was yours, and everybody always had music blaring on it when you clicked on it. It was really annoying, which actually went into the reason I developed PitchEngine the way I did. But on MySpace, I could get on there and I could share 20 photos with my friends, kind of like you can do with Facebook. And it was instant, it was easy. But as a business, forget about it. There was no way to do this. It was annoying. Businesses didn't have MySpace pages. People over 30 didn't have MySpace pages, you know? So back then, you know, the technologies were there. I knew they were tangible. I knew that they could happen, but I wasn't a tech person. I didn't know what was involved, which actually probably worked to my advantage, you know, in the end. Had I known how difficult it is to program and code, maybe I'd have been scared off. But I came up with this thought that we would go to trade shows. So for example, in the outdoor industry, we'd go to Salt Lake, to Outdoor Retailer, and we would bring these press kits, big folders full of expensive photography, and maybe we'd have product samples, and we'd have all these Word docs with headlines, and we'd spend all this time putting in all these features and junk that no one wants to read into a press release. We'd package it up and we'd haul them down there, and then the journalists that write for like Backpacker Outside, right? They would get stacks of these, like they're supposed to write about all this stuff, and sit at their office and just pour through these things. And it was just horrible. And being a journalist, a former journalist, I knew that that's not the way it happens. You know, it's just not the way people get content and get fired up about things and are interested in things. It's through relationships and talking and sort of discovery. So with PitchEngine, the idea was, I just want to package all that content up digitally and share it as a link. And you're all looking at me like, yeah, there's like 25 million platforms that do that right now. But back then, there wasn't. There was MySpace. There was no Dropbox. What happened was businesses would just share everything by email. They'd come out with a press release. They'd hit send to a bunch of journalists and send a Word doc in an email attachment. So then we had to make sure we could open the Word doc and have that version of Word. But first, the email had to get through the email spam filter, you know? So I'd have a publication call up and say, what do you have for us? Do you have any new products? Well, let me send you, we've got this new solar-powered camp stove, you know, and it's really cool, and I've got great visuals of it. I'll send it over. Okay, perfect. Send me a press release. So I send the press release. If it gets through the spam filter, bonus. If they can open it up and everything works with Word, bonus. And back then, not everything worked. You had to have like that version of that, all that stuff. So if they got that, they said, this is awesome. Send us a high-res photo. We'll get it in there. This could be the cover of our gear guide. And you're like, yes, right? That makes your year if you're doing PR at a company. So I'd say, okay, I'll package it up. I'll send you the file. We've got these 3 high-res photos of the product. We just spent thousands of dollars getting them photographed, right? Because it's expensive. And they package it up, and it'll be about 6 megs. Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't take a file over 2 megs in our email because we have this filter and a network and blah, 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 right? So they couldn't even get the thing. So then you're like, okay, well, we have developed this thing called an FTP site. And it was like this, it was like, I don't know, Dropbox, but the back end of Dropbox. There was no front end. So you would send somebody a password to log into this, basically a file on your server, and they would download things. It's way old school. It was like Napster. So which was that's my generation. Okay, so you would do this, and they're like, okay, well, and then you'd follow up like a day later, and they're like, oh, you email them, and you're like, did we do it? You get everything? Are we going to press? And they're like, oh, we couldn't get that password to work. So we put the story on, page 3 in a sidebar. And so this would go on, and I knew that I wasn't the only one. I knew that everybody in the world had this problem. And so the idea was, I want to make a digital version of this where people could paste in a video, paste in some high-res photos, tell the story, give it a headline, share these one-off announcements, press releases. So we developed this platform to let people do that so that they could just share a link instead of a press kit or a document or a PDF via email. They would share a link. And fortunately for me, I started thinking about that idea, and it just percolated. So how do these ideas take shape? I wanted to solve a problem, so it was one of those inventions that came out of trying to solve something for myself, for my company. And how to execute that was pretty difficult, but I knew that I had something, and I knew that everybody had the same challenge as I did. So I started to blog, and this was when blogging was cool. Like if you were a blogger, you were like, cool. It's like you use Snapchat all the time. It was cool. So I had there was this thing called Ning, and Ning was like a social network for yourself. Like you could create your own social network before it was like a build your own Facebook. So I created this social network around social media, PR, and journalism. And I would just blog. And mind you, I was working full time. So I was moonlighting at night, blogging. I would just write about this stuff. What is your frustration? If you're a journalist, what's a better way to get content so that you can turn this story around quicker? Or if you're a PR person, what kind of tools? So I started just blogging. And because it's a network, people can follow it. And so you can actually keep track of that. So as I started blogging, I just sort of became an authority on it. Even though I wasn't smart about it, I wasn't a guru. I had some experience, I had some ideas, and I'm not afraid to say them. so that helps, I guess. But I would just convey that. And as that happened, people started to come onto this network. And fortunately, some of those people were big influencers. Now, a lot of them are still touring and social media people, like Chris Brogan and Brian Solis and Peter Shankman and Scott Money from Ford and all these people. We had CNN and all these different people that would come in and contribute and just follow. They would listen. And this was before Facebook was really like, I don't even know if I was doing much interaction on Facebook. So I just talked about it. It would help solidify my ideas a little bit. And then when it was time, I went to an ad agency, because back then there wasn't such a thing as like dev shops, programmers. There was people that made websites. So I went to this ad agency that I'd worked with that built a website. I sat down with a couple guys over breakfast, and it was one of those like cool, when we make the movie, I'll put this scene in there where we draw it on a napkin, because that actually happened. But we just kind of drew it out and said, this is what it needs to do. And I knew it wasn't like, I wasn't inventing new technology, I was applying it, right? So it was building a website, but it was applying this technology to serve a need, to fill a niche, to accomplish a task that I needed to do. And so I met with them. A couple weeks later, or a week later, they threw out a bid. And they said, this thing is going to cost you $17,000 to build. And so I was a 26, 7-ish young man that doesn't save any money, that spends his money fly fishing and doing stuff. And I had a full-time job, so I wasn't worried about it, right? I had retirement going. So I was like, whoa, that's a lot of money, you know? I'm not giving up my car. So I sort of tabled it, and I just let it percolate, and it was hard. It was really hard, but it was one of those things that you don't really know at that stage whether you're going to do it or not. But you know it's a good idea. You know what it's going to take to do. I had met my wife on MySpace. Not really met her on MySpace, but reconnected with her on MySpace. So that's my technology story. Reconnected with her on MySpace because I dated her in college or something, and so we reconnected. Is that bad? Was that bad? Oh, sorry. So we had kind of lost touch. But anyway, she reconnected with me on MySpace. We get together. I don't remember if we're married at that stage or not, but we're real serious. Anyway. But she kept saying, and she knew I was like over the top of these ideas, right? Because you just start to have ideas, and it's bad. It's like a disease. But she said, when it's meant to be, it'll happen, which is very cliche, but it had this very specific meaning to me, and I just wanted to prove it. You know, I wanted to prove that this will happen, and I will execute. But it took time, you know, and I didn't have the money to do it and all these things. So I started to save a little bit, you know, saved a few $1,000s. And it's a fun story. It's not the end-all be-all to starting a company, but I think it's always worth sharing. People get a kick out of it. So I'm working at this outdoor company, doing this stuff at night, have this idea, know what it's going to take to build it, right? So I go to a trade show in Las Vegas. It's called SHOT Show. It's the hunting trade show. And we make binoculars, so I was there marketing, doing the PR thing. And I'm there a couple nights before, because we have to set up the show, which takes like 3 days. And a few of the wives of some of our employees, wives and spouses, are coming together to Vegas. And they're gonna, you know, they'll stay with us and see the show and all that stuff. So that was gonna be really neat. So I'm waiting, I'm bored. I'm at the hotel that's attached to the convention center. And I decide, and I'm not a gambler, but I decide to play this Deal or No Deal, because I've seen it on TV, slot machine with the penny slot thing, right? Which is not really pennies, you still have to put like 20 bucks in it. So I'm just doing this to kill time, putting dollar bills in it, right? Because I don't have a bunch of money, just trying to save to start this company. And I hit this like jackpot. It's like $3,000. And I'm like, whoa, that's just weird, you know? The thing's going on, sirens and the whole deal. It's really embarrassing. So they bring out money and they hand you like cash, like you know, like a drug dealer, cash. So I've got all this cash. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So that night, my wife arrives. I'm hiding the cash. And she's like, what are you grinning about? What is this grin for? And I couldn't get it off my face, you know? So we get up to the room, and I shore the cat. You know, it's like one of, whoa! I mean, it's only $3,000, but like in one place, it's a lot, right? So I said, you remember when you said when it's meant to be, it'll happen? And I take out this cash. And so right then, we knew that was like the catalyst. And so the next day, in the hotel, in the lobby, I call the ad agency and I say, go. And I had to pay 50% of that $16,000 down. So I said, go, and I paid them $8,000, and that's when we started. A year later, I was spending close to $40,000 a month on development alone. So the $17,000 that seemed like this huge thing was like this first little hurdle to get over. But it was definitely the catalyst, and it definitely started things in motion. Because I had spent so much time thinking about it, trying to derive the plan and figure out how it's going to make money and do all those things and laying the foundation and just like sweating it, you know, before I even had it. That stuff paid off. And because I was willing to work at it, that was the next step. And so I was working full time. PitchEngine finally went online, I think it was either late 2007 or early 2008. Our first customer, it's so funny when you handed me this, was Shure Microphones, which is this microphone I'm wearing. First paying customer to click the button, put a credit card in, and give us money. whoa, it was like kind of a cool deal, except it was just me, so it wasn't that exciting. So when I say we, I mean me at this stage, maybe my wife, if she was my wife at the time. So that was exciting, and that was the first time that it started to happen. And like I had planned, and like I had dreamed in my head, everybody had this problem. And it wasn't just that problem. The new problem that cropped up was Twitter and Facebook and all these new places to share content. Guess what? Nobody had any content. Like now everybody has content. Everybody's feeding us stuff left and right. We're getting Instagram photos from Nike and this and that, right? That didn't exist. Businesses had a website, and most of the times it was a crappy website. And they would take that website and they would put it on their Facebook page. And they would wait. And then maybe they'd wait a day and they'd put their Facebook website on their Facebook page again. So businesses were just starting to figure out social media. Like, what do we do with Facebook and Twitter? And one of the first, to make ends meet, you're doing all kinds of stuff. So one of the first things I did was consulting. And I went and consulted with a beer company. Actually, it's called New Belgium. Anybody heard of New Belgium? So they're down in Fort Collins. And I thought, this is like gravy. What's more social than beer, right? So I went down there and I started talking to them, and it actually turned out they were really smart, and there's really a lot more to it than that. And they asked really good questions. They did all this stuff, but the thing was, there was no beer companies in social then, because you had to be over 21 to even like click on the stuff. And so we did all these things about how to brand and how to think about them as something different than a beer. They started this whole revolution of beer pairing, where you would pair like pancakes with this wheat beer and do all that stuff. So it was became like wine pairing. But it was fascinating, it was interesting, it was a fun time because everybody was trying to learn. There was no Budweiser on social media, but here was this little company in Fort Collins that was gonna take on the world, and they were gonna do it. Forget it, whatever. We'll tell the lawyers, we're just testing it, So everybody was experiencing it, trying to figure it out. PitchEngine became this great tool for them to package up content, package up some fan photos. We had everything from, one of the first fun stories was a beer brand, Budweiser, has their big Clydesdales commercials, right, on the Super Bowl. So they created a pitch. They put 10-second snippets of all their commercials into one pitch, wrote a little bit about the backstory, and shared it on their social networks. And it blew up, and it was viral, and it was great. Because back then, YouTube was a page with a video. You didn't have like recommended videos and other stuff you might like, and here's some other videos and all that. That didn't exist, right? So they took those videos, they packaged them up, became this cool tool for them. And as these big brands came on and started to use it, they were sharing it, right? Budweiser makes it, they're gonna share it with a lot of people. Well, that benefits the next company that's a mom and pop sub shop in Logan, Utah. When they share on PitchEngine, they're now leveraging all that sharing because it helped us with SEO, it helped us grow in Google, it helped with the brand, it helped all those things. So we grew to 20,000 brands the first year, everything from Walmart and Cisco and Lowe's and whatever. I mean, there's 20,000 brands that I could name. It was really exciting. And it took me a year. I tried to quit my job, and they gave me a raise. So I stayed a little longer. But it got to the stage where I actually hired our first employee before I was an employee. And so we paid that person for 4 or 5 months to sit there. And then I actually started with our CFO. We got invited. We were getting pitched left and right to go to Silicon Valley, to move to Silicon Valley, to accept venture capital. People wanted to invest in the company. What is this thing? Everybody's coming to it. It's disruptive in the PR space. These big multi-million-dollar, sometimes billion-dollar companies, Berkshire Hathaway's Business Wire or PR Newswire, MarketWire, Vocus, which was PR Web. These companies were all being disrupted because their model was, put your press release in here and we're gonna send it to this email list of journalists. And that was all that existed at the time. And so when PitchEngine came along, it was a lower barrier of entry for cost. They could publish all this content. It was fun, it was social. They actually realized they have an audience. They didn't have to necessarily go through journalists. They could just talk to their customers. And so it was really a fun time, and it really started to grow and evolve. And it was highly disruptive. We got invited to South by Southwest to pitch at the Microsoft BizSpark Accelerator, it was called. Names are much shorter and cooler now, but this was like, early days, right? So we did that, and it was interesting. There was 5 companies in business, and they're like, well, this isn't social. This isn't like Twitter, you know? And I'm like, sorry. So I always kind of struggled with this thing. I was too social and you know, fun for business, but to the business people, we were too social and fun. You know, it was like this weird thing. We were kind of right down the middle. We weren't Silicon Valley enough, and we weren't New York enough. So it was kind of it was fun sometimes and challenging at other times. But that was the early years. Now we're at 50,000 brands. Our company's evolved a lot. We've gone through a lot of stages. We have challenges every day. But it's like I told people, you know, earlier today that, you know, it's still a baby. It still feels like it's a baby. I'm still learning. We're still learning with employees. I read all those books. I read all the business books. It's very easy to write a business book in retrospect, and look backwards and like write things that went well. But the reality is it is a little different than some of the perfect scenarios and the theories that people paint. It's your decision at the end of the day, and there's not a lot of rules. I don't think you go to these classes and hear about rules. I think you hear about things that you can do, things that have been done, standards, practices, best practices. You're going to hear from entrepreneurs throughout this series, and they're all going to have different ways of doing things. And so, you know, if I can leave you with it before we do a Q&A, it's like you want to use your brain. My biggest thing, there's a couple things. One is authenticity. When I'm in New York City, I'm wearing these cowboy boots. I'm the kid from Wyoming. I drive a pickup truck. That's where half my conference calls happen. Authenticity is key. People are going to buy what you have. I met some great, bright people, students today that have great business ideas. And no matter how flashy your packaging is or how great your ad budget is or how much backing you have, it's going to come down to you. And people are going to buy into you, and they're going to believe in you. And it's your work ethic. And that's really important. So you know, the authenticity piece. And I think the other big thing that obviously work ethic is probably number one, to just work your face off, not be afraid to just work. And when you're passionate about it, it's so easy. So you know, it sounds like a big deal, but when you're passionate about something, it's really easy. And then, you know, I think the last thing is I think, you know, I don't make assumptions. There's probably some great saying out there in quotes. I'm not really a quote guy, but just I really, you know, I really think assumptions are sort of the biggest obstacle a lot of companies make, or people or entrepreneurs. Don't assume things. Don't assume that customers are here, or this is the process for how we do things. PitchEngine, we created PitchEngine to be this platform. It had this, you would log in, you would fill out this form and fill in your stuff and share content and share images and all this stuff. My assumption was people knew how to do all that. That wasn't a good assumption, because people aren't very tech savvy when you look at on whole, right? We all know how to do that, certain generations maybe too, but recently we launched a tool called TinyPitch. It's just tiny.pr. And the idea was, people are really comfortable with email, so I wanted to make an invisible interface so they didn't have to log in or do anything. So now they just type their headline in the subject head, they type the text in the body, they attach the photos, and they send it to tiny@pitchengine.com, and it builds this release for them, sends them the link, and now they can share it. And so it's things like that, you know, I think they just came from making assumptions. Your assumption is it's a tech company, so you got to have a bunch of developers. But I learned as time went that more developers didn't scale the amount of money we made or the amount of customers we had. It didn't necessarily do that. And so you start to learn and fit the niches you're good at. Somebody asked me, you know, what's the biggest recommendation I could give them for marketing? And I think it's to do what you're good at. And I think that with entrepreneurship, it's the same thing. Do the things that you like to do, that you're comfortable with, that you're strong at. I'm okay getting in front of people and talking to people. I guess it was because I was a news anchor and I was super cheesy, still am. So that works for me, whereas blogging wasn't necessarily the perfect medium for me. I still like writing, it's fun, but I feel like I enjoy it much more when I can get in front of people and talk to people, and it's fun. And for me, telling that story was important. So I wrote a book about it because I spend all my time telling businesses that they need to tell their stories. And that's why they use PitchEngine to tell these stories to their customers. So I wrote this book, really short. It was actually a startup called Slim Books that said, hey, why do all books have to be big and thick? Just because publishers say so? That's a bad assumption. So then they came up with this idea that you can print as big as you want a book. So I said, okay, I'm in. So I wrote that. So it's called The New American Startup. If you see it, it's on Amazon. But that just tells the story, and it's fun. And you know, it's been a great experience for me. But again, I feel like I'm just starting. I'm envious of all you because you're starting much earlier than I, and that's really exciting. I think the future of entrepreneurship and just businesses and the things that you all have talked about, some of you that I've talked to, the aspirations that you have to do things, it's going to be really cool in the next few years. So I'm encouraged and excited by that. So before I forget, feel free to reach out to me on whatever platform. I'm pretty reachable on Twitter and Facebook and all those things. Maybe even MySpace if you've got a login. So I'm free for Q&A, I think, for people. So if you have any questions, it can be about anything except the what year I married my wife. That was 2008, by the way. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
You were talking about how did you get your platform started? How did you get your first contacts?
Good question. So the question is, I wasn't very tech savvy, or I had mentioned that I wasn't very tech savvy. How did I put together those resources or find those people or whatever? For me, I had worked at a company, and we had a website, and one of the things I was charged with was helping develop that website. So I had worked with an ad agency that just built websites. Back then, we didn't have programmers or developers or fancy names for code ninjas and all that stuff. So it was very easy, and I talked to him, and I said, it's like a website, but I'm going to do it for this particular application. And since then, I've learned to code, and I've learned a lot about dev, and I've learned about all the languages and what's all the platforms and all that stuff. And that just comes with diving in and digging your teeth into what you're doing. You'll learn all those things. I think we're going through an interesting time now where the world's reliant on developers and programmers to build those kind of companies, but that's going to change. You're going to see that shift. I'm a big believer that, you know, you don't have to know how to build an entire house to live in one. You shouldn't have to know how to build an entire website to have one. And right now you do. Regardless of what those fancy ones on the commercials say, they never really turn out that way, in my experience so far. So I think we're getting past that, where you don't have to be a tech genius. Yeah?
Your look at the casino obviously helped you jumpstart everything that you are today. Did you have a plan B if, let's say, you didn't win that money? Were you going to continue saving dime by dime, or what was your plan from there?
Yeah.
I don't plan to hit it big in the casino, so
That's a good.
I try and relate to a story like that.
Yeah. So good question. The question was, I hit it big with my $3,000 in Las Vegas. Yeah. And so, did I have a plan B if that hadn't turned out? I didn't have a plan A, quite honestly. I got lucky with that, but it served as a catalyst. And I like to tell that story because it was a turning point, you know, to make me go, let's do it. And I don't know what now I don't need those. I'll just do it. You know, I'm not scared. But I think in the very beginning, like, you just need you need that push. I talk to a lot of people that are like hesitant, reluctant, and all those things, and it's out of fear. It's totally out of fear. But you know, somebody told me this, and I really believe it. It's really hard to fail in this country, like really, really fail. And I just kind of remember that. And I think that the work ethic part, that I already had a career. So worst case scenario, I'm a productive citizen with a career and starting a family, and that's great. But to chase this passion and to do this thing, I knew that work would pay off. The work, if I put the work into it, I could do it. And so it takes confidence, it takes all those things. And some of that stuff you'll build over time. I'm a lot more confident about building a business, and we've actually built some since. I'm much more confident now than I was then. So that's a good question. But I didn't really have a plan for how to execute necessarily. When it was meant to be, it was going to happen. So, yeah.
So the had done it before or after, do you think it would have made a difference?
Before or after?
Your win in
Oh. No, I don't think so. I think, so the question is, would I have started it if I wouldn't, would I have started it before or after? Would it made a difference? I don't think so. No, it was just merely it kind of, I don't know, it just set me over the edge. I don't even think I had the whole 8,000 at the time, you know? So it was just kind of a catalyst. It was like, okay, it's time to do it, you know? If it was a little comfort thing, I guess. I don't know. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So you talk about basically don't buy into the idea of failure. Like it's just it doesn't happen. But then you also say things you kind of going off last week too, where you can't be afraid to take risks at the same time. So you said a lot about spending the time building the foundation, putting everything in place. I guess when does it get to the point where maybe you're being a little bit too cautious, fear and failure? You know, because okay, I have to make sure this is in place and this is in place. At that point, is it, okay, am I doing it because I'm scared to make that non-jackpot jump?
Yeah.
Or is it just, I don't want to be too risky?
Yeah.
And so,
That's a great question. So when is the right time? Are you, if you plan too much, are you preventing yourself from launching it, you know, and trying not to fail? And I said failure is not an option. That's not to say you won't make mistakes, right? You know, I made plenty of mistakes too. But you'll make mistakes and you'll learn things. But I think in that, the consensus, or I guess what you read about, when you read these companies like, oh, he started a company, they took on $200 million in investment and it flopped. But he's on to the next thing and he's got Google in the back rear view mirror or whatever. It's like, that, you know, I think going in with that concept that if this fails, it's okay, is bad. But I don't think that it should prevent you from doing it, obviously. If you're passionate about it and you feel like the pieces are in place, go for it. But you'll be smart about it. If I'm gonna jump off a cliff, which I'm not gonna do, and I'm wearing a parachute, I'm gonna check that parachute out. I'm gonna watch the video like 10 times that they make you watch, and I'm gonna make sure no one's around me to push me, and I'm not gonna fall, I'm gonna have good traction, right? I'm gonna do all those things so that I make the right choice, right? So I think, you know, you do it with a grain of salt, you know? So, yeah.
It's not like that, like if you make a business or start a business, you're bringing something good in the world. I was just wondering about PitchEngine. Do you guys donate to any social causes or promote social causes through your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and I think, so the question is, we talked about, I mentioned sort of doing good in the world just by by virtue of having a business and being productive. The question is, does PitchEngine donate to any causes? And the answer is yes. It comes in various ways, right? One of the favorite things that I did, we like to do things that really, we're passionate about, and we can make an impact, that we feel we can make an impact. Some companies want to hire all the veterans, right? AKA Starbucks. Some companies want to donate all this money to whatever, you know, you can name the companies, right? What we did is last summer, maybe it's 2 summers ago now, we put the call out to high school students between certain ages, and we put on a code camp for them. So they came to our facilities, they worked with our developers and with me and our different marketing people and everybody, and they learned how to code, and they spent their summer coding in this code camp, and it was a blast. And we went on to do it for the state and teach, you know, basically underemployed people how to code and how to build a website and do those things. And so we try to do it in different ways, you know. But I think that, you know, I hear a lot of people that's the reason they're going into business, and that is a noble thing, and I don't take that away from anybody, but know the fundamental thing that it's got to work like a machine, you know, in order to spin off money to give. You know what I mean? You know, it's easy to talk about giving and want to give, but you got to have the pieces in place first to give, and that's just my advice there. Yeah.
Can you talk about why you've not received
Yeah, that's good.
you haven't taken in outside funding?
Yeah, so as the business evolved, that's a great question. We were piling on customers. those big companies were calling their customers and their salespeople, and they were saying, well, what about PitchEngine? Have you heard about PitchEngine? How do you compare to PitchEngine? They're like, what is this? So then they started having canned responses, and they would read, here's what we compare to PitchEngine. It was funny. So we were, and I started to find out, we were the discussion and the topic at boardrooms and all this stuff. And so a few years into it, a couple summers ago, we had an acquisition offer, and we had these business guys flew into Little Lander, Wyoming. Well, they couldn't find the Lander. They had to find a Riverton and drive there. So we brought them in. We showed them the place. We took them out to a cowboy steakhouse and gave them a steak, and eventually said no. But it was a really good experience for us. I got a lot of insight into their company. We did a lot of homework. We went out to this particular company and researched them, and it was in the PR space. Their competitor caught wind, and they wanted to acquire us as well, and they were sort of playing off each other. And it wasn't the right time, and I think that was probably one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made. I don't think there's multimillionaires in my family or lineage or anything, so it was a pretty tough decision to turn down that sort of money, and but at the same time it was very very easy. So I thought long and hard about it. I thought that what we're trying to do, I still feel like we're just getting started in trying to accomplish. I knew that I had been at a corporation. I know how corporations operate. I knew that it probably wasn't going to take the path I wanted to take, and that's okay. There's a time and a place to sell companies and to let people grow those. But I felt like we were so much in our infancy. The other thing was we were building a company. That you don't hear about this when you read about Silicon Valley startups. They build these companies. They have hundreds of employees. Well, what happens when they sell their company and that company shuts it down? Where do all those employees go? I don't care if they're given millions of dollars to whatever. They just put all these people out of jobs, right? So when you start to build a company and you start to hire employees and move people to your town, and they move their spouse who works at a hospital and their kids, they start going to school, and you move another family in, and your company starts to grow, those decisions become different. And so that sustainable thing is building a sustainable business is you don't always get those options. If you sell it, it's gone. That's an impactful thing. If I want to stay in my community and I want to live in my community, now what? And so those things all kind of came into play, I think, for me. And we never went the venture capital route. It's not to say we wouldn't someday. I think when the time's right, we'll probably have to do some of those things. And as we spin off some other parts of our business, I start to see where those things can happen in order to scale at a grand scale. But for us, that's what we've done. It's enabled us to make the decisions. I don't have a board of directors that says we can't buy a foosball table or whatever for the office. And there's a lot to being able to stay in small town USA. I think I talk about this a little bit in the book, but we've got all these towns and little towns that you're probably all from, some of these little towns where there's no businesses on Main Street and there are vacant buildings and all these things are happening. But there's businesses that can go in there, and there's newer type of business models that can replace the old bookstore or the old coffee shop or whatever that isn't necessarily sustainable anymore. So we renovated space on our Main Street. It's a great footprint for us. We're a big fish in a little sea. Wyoming, I think we only have 500,000 people or less than that, right? That helps us, right? That helps. And you look at this room, if everybody was as smart as you, it'd be a lot harder for you. But luckily they're not, so you're going to be fine. Yeah, go ahead.
So, since you didn't sell off, what is your dream?
Oh, those dream, that's a great question. So as you get going, the challenges change. Usually somebody says, what was the most difficult challenge? But what happens is that those things change. My dream is obviously to blow it up. I want PitchEngine to be used by, I want every business to know. I want it to be a household name and all those things. But at the same time, I want to grow it. I want the business to sustain. You want all those things. Sometimes it's trying to find employees. That's the hardest thing ever. And then the next month it might be trying to innovate on a new product with developers that speak a different language or whatever. Our developers all speak English, but But it's those kinds of things that it ebbs and flows and it changes. But ultimately, I want to everything that everybody wants. I think I want to provide for my family and grow a business, and I love to be able to do what I'm passionate about. I love to work with the people I work with. So even if it's not PitchEngine, if PitchEngine went away or we sold it or whatever happened, it would be the next thing. So I like to find the people that want to be part of this thing, not necessarily a brand or a business. I want to find good people that we can build the next thing and the next thing. And maybe it's a hot dog stand, but we'll make one really killer hot dog stand. Yeah.
One more question.
Cool. That's no pressure, no pressure. This is, all these people, this is the last question, and it's you.
How much was your buyout offer and how many employees do you have right now?
We have about 15 employees. The offer in total was $9 million. And if it was 20 million or 60 million or whatever, it might be a different decision. If we had 200 employees, maybe it's a different decision. But at the time, it was, felt right. So, thank you all. I really appreciate it.